I never thought I'd be sharing an apartment in Bangkok with my best friend who was running from his mistakes, but that's exactly where I found myself last summer. The humidity was suffocating that night as Nate stumbled through my door, a duffel, bag slung over his shoulder and desperation in his eyes. "I really messed up this time, Jake," he whispered, collapsing onto my couch. And just like that, I became an accomplice in his escape from a family he had shattered beyond repair. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It all started 3 years ago when Nate was still dating Olivia. They had been together for 5 years, practically inseparable since high school. Everyone expected them to get married eventually. Her parents already called him son, and he'd been saving for a ring. The perfect American couple with the perfect future mapped out. Until that Christmas party changed everything. Olivia's younger sister, Maya, had just returned from her first semester at college. I remember Nate mentioning how different she looked. No longer the awkward teenager who used to follow them around, but a confident young woman. I should have seen the warning signs when he kept bringing her up in conversation. "Maya's studying psychology now," he'd say, or "Maya has really grown into herself." Little comments that seemed innocent at the time. The Christmas party at their parents' house was where it happened. Olivia had been called into work for an emergency shift at the hospital where she was completing her residency. Nate decided to go to the party anyway. Another red flag I missed. He called me the next morning, voice trembling. "I need to see you right now," he said. When I arrived at his apartment, he was sitting in the dark, still wearing his clothes from the night before. "I slept with Maya," he confessed, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. I remember feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't some random hookup at a bar. This was his girlfriend's sister, the ultimate betrayal. "It was just one stupid drunk mistake," he insisted, running his hands through his hair. "Olivia can never know. It would destroy her." And I believed him. I believed it was a one-time thing that would never happen again. That's what best friends do, right? They trust each other. They keep each other's secrets, even the devastating ones. For a few weeks, everything seemed normal. Nate was more attentive to Olivia than ever, showering her with gifts and surprise dates. I thought maybe he was working through his guilt, trying to make amends in his own way without confessing. I convinced myself that telling Olivia would only cause unnecessary pain. The mistake was made, and it wouldn't happen again. Then Maya started calling him. At first, he ignored her calls, but eventually, he started sneaking away to meet her. He swore to me it was just to make sure she was okay, that she understood it couldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him. 3 months later, Maya showed up at Nate's door in tears. She was pregnant. I was with him when she arrived, and I'll never forget the look on his face when she told him, like watching someone's entire world collapse in slow motion. We sat in stunned silence as she sobbed on his couch, explaining how she'd tried to ignore it, how she'd been in denial until she couldn't be anymore. "What are you going to do?" I asked after she left. "I don't know," he whispered. "But I need to tell Olivia." The confrontation was even worse than we imagined. Nate asked me to wait outside his and Olivia's apartment while he told her everything. I heard the screaming from the hallway, Olivia's voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard before, objects shattering against walls. When she finally stormed out, she didn't even look at me. She just walked past, mascara streaming down her face, her entire body shaking. Maya's parents were next. They had always treated Nate like family, and now he had betrayed their trust in the worst possible way. Mr. Reynolds, a man I'd seen tear up at Thanksgiving dinner while expressing gratitude for his family, threatened to kill Nate if he ever came near either of his daughters again. Throughout all of this, I stood by Nate. Not because I condoned what he did, I didn't. But because beneath the terrible choices, he was still my friend. A friend who needed someone to stop him from completely self-destructing. When Maya decided to keep the baby, everything became even more complicated. Nate wanted to be involved, to take responsibility, but neither family would allow it. The Reynolds closed ranks around Maya, shutting Nate out completely. Olivia moved back home to help her sister through the pregnancy while continuing her medical residency. The perfect family united against the man who had betrayed them. Nate spiraled. He lost his job at the architecture firm after showing up drunk too many times. He stopped paying rent and was evicted from his apartment. He crashed on my couch for weeks, barely eating, barely speaking. I tried getting him into therapy, but he refused. The guilt was eating him alive. "I deserve this," he'd say whenever I tried to help him get back on his feet. "I destroyed everyone I care about." 6 months later, Maya gave birth to a little girl named Emma. Nate found out through a mutual friend. No one had told him. No one had invited him to the hospital. He wasn't listed on the birth certificate. That night, he got drunk and showed up at the Reynolds house, demanding to see his daughter. The police were called. No charges were filed, but a restraining order was. Nate wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Maya or Emma. I thought that would be rock bottom, but I was wrong. The real rock bottom came 3 months later when Nate managed to convince one of Maya's friends to send him pictures of Emma. I found him sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., sobbing as he scrolled through images of his daughter, a daughter he wasn't allowed to know. "She has my eyes," he kept saying. "She has my eyes, Jake." That was when I suggested we leave. Get out of Boston, away from the constant reminders, the restraining orders, the broken relationships that couldn't be fixed. I had received a job offer in Bangkok teaching English at an international school. It wasn't much, but it was enough to support both of us until Nate got back on his feet. "What about Emma?" he asked. "You can't be a father to her right now," I said gently. "Not like this. Get yourself together first, then figure out how to be in her life." It took some convincing, but eventually he agreed. We left 3 weeks later, telling almost no one where we were going. I justified it to myself as a fresh start for both of us. Nate needed to heal, to become someone worthy of being in his daughter's life, and I needed a change after watching my best friend destroy himself and everyone around him. The first few months in Bangkok were a blur of humid days and neon nights. Our apartment was small, 2 bedrooms above a noisy street food market that stayed open until the early hours of the morning. The constant bustle and unfamiliar language created a buffer between us and everything we'd left behind. Here, Nate wasn't the guy who slept with his girlfriend's sister and had a secret baby. He was just another foreigner trying to navigate a new culture. He found work at an expat bar owned by an Australian man named Tim. The hours were long, but it kept Nate busy, gave him purpose. For a while, I thought we had escaped the past. I thought he was healing. Then the messages from Maya started. It began with a single email sent to Nate's old account, which he hardly checked anymore. "Emma took her first steps yesterday," it read. Nothing else. No explanation for why she was suddenly reaching out after months of silence. Nate showed me the email, his hands shaking. "What does this mean?" he asked. "Is she trying to torture me?" "Maybe she's just trying to find closure," I suggested. "Or maybe she thinks you deserve to know." More messages followed. Small updates about Emma. Her first words, her favorite. Toys, a video of her laughing as she splashed in a kiddie pool. Never any direct communication about their situation, just these little glimpses into his daughter's life. Nate became obsessed with these messages. He would wait by his computer for hours, refreshing his inbox constantly. The progress he'd made started to unravel. He began drinking heavily again, missing shifts at the bar. Tim warned him once, twice, then finally let him go. One night, after particularly heavy drinking, Nate confessed something that chilled me. "I've been sending money to Maya," he slurred. "Almost everything I make." "Since when?" I asked, stunned. "Since the third email," he admitted. "I set up a transfer. It's not child support, not officially, but I need to do something, Jake." I was concerned about his dwindling finances, but more worried about what this communication meant. "Have you responded?" "To her messages. To her messages." He nodded slowly. "I asked if I could see Emma on a video call." My stomach dropped. "What did she say?" "She hasn't answered yet." His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. "But she will. She has to." 3 days later, Maya's response came. "Not yet. Maybe someday. But thank you for the money. It helps." Those few words sent Nate into a frenzy of hope. She said not yet. That means eventually, right? She's considering it. I tried to temper his expectations, but there was no reasoning. With him, he began working double shifts at a new bar, sending even more money back to Boston. Every spare dollar went to the woman who had once been his girlfriend's sister, the mother of his child, a person who represented both his greatest mistake and his greatest loss. 6 months into our Bangkok exile, Nate received another email from Maya that changed everything. "Olivia is getting married next month. I thought you should know." I was with him when he read it, watched as the color drained from his face. Olivia had moved on. The woman he'd been with for 5 years, the one he'd planned to propose to before he ruined everything, was starting a new life without him. "I'm happy for her," he said quietly, but later that night, I heard him crying through the thin wall between our bedrooms. The next morning, he announced he was going back to Boston. "What? Why?" I asked, alarmed. "The restraining order expired 3 months ago," he finished. "I checked. That doesn't mean they want to see you," I argued. "Maya's messages don't sound like invitations to me." "I have to try, Jake," he insisted. "I have a daughter. She's walking and talking and growing up without me. I can't hide in Thailand forever." "And what's your plan?" I demanded. "Show up on their doorstep? That worked out so well last time." He flinched but stood his ground. "I've changed. I've been sober for months. I'm saving money. I'm not the same guy who left." "It's only been 9 months," I reminded him. "That's not enough time." "It has to be," he said firmly, "because my daughter isn't going to wait for me to feel ready." I spent days trying to talk him out of it, but his mind was made up. He had booked a flight back to Boston for the following week. In a desperate attempt to change his mind, I called the one person I thought might have influence over him, his older brother, Daniel. Daniel and I had never been close, but we shared a common concern for Nate. He was more pragmatic than his brother, less driven by emotion. When I explained the situation, he was silent for a long moment. "Let me make some calls," he finally said. 2 days later, Daniel called back with news. He had spoken to the Reynolds family through a mutual friend. Their position hadn't changed. They didn't want Nate anywhere near Maya or Emma. If he returned to Boston with the intention of seeing them, they would immediately file for another restraining order. "There's more," Daniel added grimly. "Maya's engaged to her college professor. The guy has been around Emma since she was born. They're presenting themselves as a family unit." When I relayed this information to Nate, something inside him seemed to break. He didn't cry or shout. He just sat very still, staring at nothing. "So she's replacing me," he finally said. "She's giving Emma another father." "Maybe it's for the best," I suggested cautiously. "Emma deserves stability." "And I don't deserve to be her father?" he snapped. "I made a terrible mistake, Jake. I'm not denying that, but that little girl is still mine." Before I could respond, his phone pinged with a new email notification. It was from Maya. "I need to ask you something important. Can we talk? Really talk. Not just these messages." Nate stared at the screen in disbelief. After months of brief updates and non-committal responses, Maya wanted to actually communicate. He immediately replied, suggesting a video call. Her response came quickly. "Tomorrow, 9 p.m. your time." That night was one of the longest of my life. Nate paced our small apartment, rehearsing what he would say, how he would present himself. He showered twice, changed his clothes 3 times. By the time 9 p.m. arrived, he was a bundle of raw nerves. I offered to leave, to give him privacy. But he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Stay," he pleaded. "I need you here." When Maya's face appeared on the screen, I was struck by how much she resembled Olivia, the same heart-shaped face and wide-set eyes. But where Olivia had always radiated warmth, Maya looked worn, cautious. "Nate?" she said simply. "Maya?" he responded, his voice cracking slightly. "Thank you for the updates about Emma, for the pictures." She nodded tightly. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." My heart sank. Was she going to cut off communication completely? "Richard and I are getting married," she continued, confirming what Daniel had told us. "He's been in Emma's life since the beginning. He loves her, and she adores him." Nate's knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the table, but his voice remained steady. "I understand." "No, I don't think you do," Maya said. "Richard wants to adopt Emma, legally, as his daughter." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Adoption would mean Nate would lose all legal rights to his child, not that he had exercised any thus far, but the possibility would be gone forever. Nate struggled to find words. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Maya replied. "But I need your consent for this to happen. Richard can't adopt her unless you relinquish your parental rights." "And if I don't?" Nate's voice was barely audible. Maya's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to go to court, prove abandonment, bring up everything that happened, make it all public record." She paused. "I don't want to do that, Nate. Not to you, not to my family, and especially not to Emma." The implied threat was clear. Either sign away his rights voluntarily or face a messy legal battle that would dredge up all the pain and mistakes of the past. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course," she nodded. "But we need an answer. Within 2 weeks. The wedding is in a month, and we want to start the adoption process immediately after." After Maya disconnected, Nate sat in silence for so long I began to worry about him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "She planned it perfectly," he said. "Waited until I was halfway around the world, until Emma had bonded with this Richard guy. And now she's giving me an impossible choice." "What are you going to do?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I need to see her, Jake. Before I make any decision, I need to see my daughter. In person, just once." "Do you really think Maya will agree to that?" "Probably not," he admitted. "But I have to try." The next day, Nate sent Maya a carefully worded email. He acknowledged that Richard might be the better father figure for Emma right now. He even admitted that adoption might ultimately be in her best interest. But before he could make such a momentous decision, he needed to meet his daughter face to face, just once. Maya's response was swift and unyielding. "That's not possible. I'm sorry." That night, Nate drank for the first time in months. Not a wild binge, but a steady, deliberate march toward oblivion. I watched helplessly as 9 months of progress disappeared in a matter of hours. When he finally passed out on the couch, I covered him with a blanket and sat beside him, wondering how we had ended up here. In the morning, I woke to find Nate, hunched over his laptop, eyes bloodshot but focused. "I'm going back," he announced without preamble. "Not permanently, just for a week. Long enough to see Emma, even if it's just from a distance. Nate, that's a terrible idea, I protested. If Maya finds out, I don't care, he cut me off. This is my only chance to ever see my daughter. After I sign those papers, she'll never know I existed. I tried every argument I could think of. It was borderline stalking. It could backfire. Spectacularly, it would only cause more pain for everyone involved. But Nate was unmovable. He had already booked a flight for the following day. I'm not asking you to approve, he said finally. I'm just telling you what I'm going to do. That evening, as Nate packed a small bag for his Boston trip, I made a difficult decision of my own. While he was in the shower, I sent an email to Maya from my own account. Maya, this is Jake, Nate's friend. He's coming to Boston tomorrow. He's desperate to see Emma, even from a distance before he makes any decision about the adoption. I can't stop him, but I thought you should know. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't expect a response, but one came within the hour. Thank you for the warning. I appreciate your honesty. Nothing else. No indication of what she might do with this information. The next morning, I drove Nate to the airport, a knot of dread sitting heavy in my stomach. As we pulled up to the departures terminal, I made one last attempt to reason with him. Please think about what you're doing, I urged. If they see you, if they call the police, I know the risks, he interrupted. I've thought about nothing else. Then why are you still going? He looked at me, his expression more resolved than I'd seen in months. Because someday, when Emma's older, she might ask about her real father, and I need to be able to tell her that I tried, that I didn't just sign her away without fighting to see her first. I couldn't argue with that. As flawed as his plan was, as potentially disastrous as the consequences might be, I understood the desperation driving him. If our positions were reversed, I might have done the same thing. Just be careful, I said, pulling him into a quick hug. And call me when you land. I will, he promised. As I watched him walk into the terminal, rolling suitcase trailing behind him, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing good would come of this trip. Some mistakes, once made, can never truly be fixed. They can only be survived. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have predicted, was how that week would change all our lives forever. How one desperate attempt to see his child would set in motion a chain of events that would bring us to where we are now. Me in Bangkok, Nate in a place I never expected him to be, and Emma caught in between. But that's the next part of the story. Legal ways? He interrupted bitterly. Have you seen what's happening? They're using the legal system to systematically cut me out. By the time I get out of jail, Emma will legally be someone else's daughter. I took a deep breath. I understand why you're desperate, but this isn't the answer. Then what is? He demanded. Tell me, Jake. What's the magical solution I'm missing? I had no answer for him. There was no easy solution, no path forward that didn't involve loss and pain. I'd spent the entire flight trying to formulate an argument that would sway him, but in the face of his raw desperation, words felt useless. So instead, I told him the truth. I warned Maya you were coming, I confessed quietly. Before you left Bangkok, I emailed her, told her your flight details. That's why they were waiting at the airport. The silence that followed was deafening. Nate stared at me, incomprehension giving way to understanding, then to a betrayal so profound it physically hurt to witness. You did what? He finally whispered. I was trying to protect you from yourself, I rushed to explain. I knew if you showed up there, if you violated another restraining order, you're the reason I'm facing jail time? His voice was dangerously quiet. You're the reason they're taking my daughter away for good? Nate, you have to understand. Get out. He stood abruptly, pointing to the door. Get the fuck out right now. Daniel appeared in the doorway, alarmed. by the shouting. "What's going on?" "Your friend here," Nate spat the word, "is the reason I was arrested. He tipped them off." Daniel's eyes widened, looking between us. "Is that true?" I nodded miserably. "I thought I was helping." "By betraying me?" Nate's voice cracked. "By siding with them over me? After everything we've been through?" "I never sided with anyone," I protested. "I was trying to stop you from making a terrible mistake." "Well, congratulations," he laughed bitterly. "You helped me make an even worse one. Now get out before I do something we'll both regret." I looked to Daniel for support, but his expression was inscrutable. With a sinking heart, I realized I'd lost both brothers' trust in one fell swoop. "Please," I tried one last time. "Don't do anything rash. Think about what's really best for Emma." "Don't you dare say her name," Nate hissed. "You've lost that right." I left without another word, the door slamming behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. Standing on the steps of the brownstone, I pulled out my phone and booked a room at a nearby hotel. I wasn't leaving Boston, not when Nate was still a threat to himself and others. Not when I was partly responsible for his desperate state. The next morning, I called Daniel, who answered on the fourth ring. "He's gone," he said without preamble. My heart stopped. "What do you mean, gone? Did he—" "Not what you're thinking," Daniel clarified quickly. "He didn't take Emma, but he's not at my place anymore. He left sometime during the night." "Any idea where he went?" "None. He took his passport, though. But he was ordered to surrender it," I pointed out. "Yeah, well, he had a second one. Old one that was technically expired but still usable. I found the drawer where he kept it emptied out." "Have you called the police?" Daniel hesitated. "Not yet. I'm not sure what to tell them. That my brother might be fleeing prosecution? That would only make things worse for him." He was right, but the alternative, saying nothing, seemed equally dangerous. "I need to talk to Maya," I decided aloud. "What? Why?" "Because if Nate's gone, she needs to be careful. Even if he didn't. Take Emma this time, he might still try." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I have her number," he finally said, "from when all this first happened. But Jake, are you sure this is a good idea? You've already interfered once. And I'll keep interfering if it means preventing something. Worse," I insisted. "Text me her number." An hour later, I was sitting in a coffee shop near Boston Common, my hands wrapped around a cup I wasn't drinking, waiting for Maya to arrive. I'd been surprised when she agreed to meet me, surprised and suspicious. What did she hope to gain? When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The last time I'd seen Maya had been at Olivia's birthday party 3 years earlier, before any of this happened. She'd been 19 then, a college freshman still finding herself. The woman who approached my table now moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the room cautiously before settling on me. "Jake," she acknowledged, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming," I said, studying her face. The resemblance to Olivia was still there, but muted somehow, as if the experiences of the past 2 years had carved out something distinct. "You said it was important," she replied simply. "About Nate." I nodded. "He's missing. Left his brother's place sometime last night, possibly with an expired passport. I'm concerned about what he might do." Maya's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her purse. "You think he's coming for Emma?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I thought you should be aware. Take extra precautions." She was quiet. For a moment, her eyes assessing me. "Why are you doing this? First the warning about his flight, now this. Isn't he supposed to be your best friend?" The question stung because it echoed my own doubts. "He is. But that doesn't mean I support him doing something that would destroy his life. Or yours." or Emma's. So this is all about protecting us? Her skepticism was evident. Partly, I acknowledged. But it's also about protecting Nate from himself. He's not thinking clearly. Hasn't been for a long time. Maya's face softened fractionally. No, he hasn't. She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. After a few taps, she slid it across the table to me. On the screen was a photo of a little girl with dark curls and familiar eyes. Nate's eyes, unmistakably, playing in a sandbox. "This is Emma," Maya said quietly. "She's smart, stubborn, has nightmares sometimes that only go away if you let her sleep with this ratty blue stuffed elephant she's had since she was born." I looked up, confused by this sudden shift. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you should know who you're protecting," she replied. "And because I'm not the villain Nate thinks I am." She took the phone back, scrolling to another photo, this one of Emma sitting on the lap of a man I didn't recognize, both of them laughing at something off camera. "Richard," she supplied. "My fiancé. Emma calls him Riri because she can't quite manage Richard yet." "He seems good with her," I offered cautiously. "He is." Maya put the phone away. "He loves her like she's his own. And she adores him. They have this whole bedtime routine with silly voices and special songs." She trailed off, then fixed me with a direct gaze. "But he's not trying to replace Nate. That was never the plan." "Then what is the plan?" I asked. "Because from where Nate's standing, it looks like you're erasing him from Emma's life." Maya's eyes flashed. "He erased himself the moment he decided to run away to Thailand instead of staying and fighting for his daughter." "That's not fair," I defended automatically. "He was a mess. You shut him out completely. Because he showed up drunk on my parents' doorstep," she shot back, her voice rising enough that several nearby patrons glanced our way. She lowered her voice. "Do you have any idea what that was like, for all of us?" Olivia had just started putting herself back together, and then there he was, screaming on our lawn at midnight. I had no response to that. I'd heard Nate's version of events so many times that I'd almost forgotten there were other perspectives, other truths. "The restraining order wasn't my idea," Maya continued more calmly. "It was my father's. And maybe it was extreme, but it felt necessary at the time." "And the adoption?" I challenged. "Is that necessary too?" She held my gaze steadily. "Richard is the one who's there, Jake. Every day. For the nightmares, the scraped knees, the first words, all of it. While Nate was... where exactly? In Thai bars? Sending occasional money when he felt guilty enough? The accusation wasn't entirely fair, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. Nate had tried to stay involved in the only ways available to him, but they were poor substitutes for actual presence. "He wants to do better," I said quietly. "That's why he came back. That's why he came back." "By violating a restraining order?" Maya shook her head. "That's not doing better. That's the same impulsive, self-destructive behavior that started this whole mess." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "I have to go. My mother's with Emma and she's not feeling well." She gathered her purse, then paused. "If you hear from Nate, if you find out where he is or what he's planning, will you let me know?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure. He'll contact me again, not after I betrayed him." "You didn't betray him," she said firmly. "You stopped him from making an even bigger mistake." She pulled a business card from her purse and slid it across the table. "My number. Please use it if you hear anything." After she left, I sat there holding her card, feeling pulled in opposing directions. My loyalty to Nate warred with my growing conviction that Maya wasn't the manipulative villain he'd painted her to be. She was just a young mother trying to create stability for her child, a stability that Nate, for all his love and good intentions, had never been able to provide. I was still sitting there an hour later when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. It's me. Nate's voice, distant and staticky. I sat up straight. Where are you? Does it matter? He asked dully. Yes, it fucking matters. Everyone's worried sick. Daniel said you took your old passport. I'm not doing it, he interrupted. The thing you think I'm going to do. I'm not going to take Emma. Relief flooded through me. Thank God. Where are you? I'll come get you. I'm at Logan, Terminal E. My heart sank. You're leaving the country? Nate, that's still fleeing prosecution. They'll extradite you. Not to where I'm going. Which is where exactly? He was quiet. For a moment. Back to Bangkok. For now, then. I don't know. Maybe Cambodia. They've got an expat community. I struggled to understand. So you're just giving up? On everything? On Emma? I'm giving her what she needs, he said quietly. A chance at a normal life, without a criminal father complicating things. His words echoed Maya's so closely it was unsettling. What about the adoption? Are you going to consent? I already did, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Signed the papers this morning before I left Daniel's. My lawyer is filing them today. I was stunned into silence. After everything, the desperate trip back to Boston, the arrest, the talk of kidnapping, this was the last thing I expected. Why? I finally managed. I saw her, Jake. His voice was thick with emotion. At the airport that day, for just a few seconds, and she was happy, healthy, loved. Maya's doing a good job. Richard seems like a decent guy, and I'm a mess. Have been since this all started. But she's your daughter, I whispered. Exactly, he replied. Which means I have to do what's best for her, not what's easiest for me. He paused. My flight's boarding soon. I wanted someone to know, to understand why I did it. Wait, I said quickly. You can't just disappear again. What about the charges? What about Daniel? The lawyer says with the signed adoption consent, they might drop the charges, especially if I'm out of the country. As for Daniel, he sighed. I left him a letter. He'll understand. Eventually. I wanted to argue more, to convince him to stay and face things, but I could hear the resolve in his voice. This wasn't an impulse decision, not like his plan to take Emma had been. This was something harder, more painful, and ultimately braver. Where should I send your things? I asked instead. From the apartment? Donate them, he said. I'm starting over. Clean slate. Will you at least let me know when you land, so I know you're safe? A pause. Yeah, I can do that. The airport PA system blared in the background. That's my flight. I have to go. Nate, I said quickly. I'm sorry, for everything. Me too, he answered softly. More than you know. The line went dead, and I sat staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. Against all odds, Nate had made the hardest choice of all. Not fleeing with his daughter, not fighting a hopeless legal battle, but stepping aside to give Emma the stable life he couldn't provide. It wasn't the ending any of us had expected. It certainly wasn't justice, at least not in any straightforward sense. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of healing. As I walked out of the coffee shop into the bright Boston afternoon, I pulled out my phone again and typed a brief message to the number on Maya's card. He's gone. Back to Thailand. Signed. The adoption papers before he left. You don't need to worry anymore. Her response came quickly. Thank you for letting me know. And Jake? When Emma's older, I'll tell her about him. The good parts. I promise. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small thread connecting father and daughter across oceans and years. A thread that might someday be strong enough to build upon. 3 days later, I boarded my own flight back to Bangkok, uncertain what I would find there, or if Nate would even want to see me after everything that had happened. But I knew I couldn't leave him alone, not again. Whatever came next, whatever life looked like on the other side of all this pain and loss, we would face it together. What I couldn't have known then was how that decision would lead us to where we are now, with Nate fighting battles I never saw coming, and me caught in the crossfire of a situation that makes his original mistake look simple by comparison. Because just when you think a story has reached its conclusion, life has a way of writing chapters you never imagined possible. I found Nate living in a cramped studio apartment above a noodle shop in Bangkok's Chinatown district, far from our old place near the international school. The room reeked of fish sauce and cigarettes, with clothes strewn across every surface, and empty bottles lined up like sentinels along the windowsill. "Home sweet home," he said when I appeared in his doorway, not looking particularly surprised to see me. He stepped aside to let me in, the gesture mechanical, devoid of emotion. "How long have you been here?" I asked, taking in the squalor. Twin mattress lay directly on the floor, sheets tangled and unwashed. A single fan pushed the hot air around ineffectively. "Since I got back. About a week." He cleared some clothes from a plastic chair, offering me the sole seating option besides the bed. "Tim's cousin owns the building. Got me a deal." I sat, unsure where to begin. The gulf between us felt vast, unnavigable. "You didn't have to come back," he said, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine," I countered. He shrugged, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. "Well, I am. Better than fine, actually. I'm free." The word hung between us, its meaning unclear. Free from what? Emma? The legal troubles? Me? "I went to see Maya before I left Boston," I said, watching him carefully. We talked. His face remained impassive. "Good for you." "She's not the villain in this story, Nate." His eyes flashed briefly. "No? Then who is?" It was a loaded question. In his mind, there had to be someone to blame. Maya, her parents, Richard, me, perhaps even himself. The truth was messier, made up of bad choices and worse timing, of human flaws colliding in the worst possible ways. "Maybe there isn't one," I suggested quietly. He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "That's convenient. No villains means no one has to be held accountable, right? We can all just move on like nothing happened." "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Jake? Enlighten me with your great wisdom, since you seem to have it all figured out." The bitterness in his voice was caustic. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that his anger was justified. "I meant that sometimes life is just messy. People make mistakes. They hurt each other without meaning to. It doesn't make them villains." "I signed away my daughter," he said flatly. "Forever. Does that make me the villain then? The deadbeat dad who abandoned his kid? You did what you thought was best for her," I reminded him gently. He turned away, staring out the grimy window at the bustling street below. "I did what was easy." There was nothing easy about that decision, and you know it. Silence stretched. Between us, filled only by the ambient noise of the city, motorbikes honking, vendors calling out, the perpetual pulse of Bangkok continuing regardless of our personal dramas. "Why are you here, Jake?" he finally asked, his back still to me. "Because you're my friend," I answered simply. "And I'm worried about you." He turned, his expression unreadable. The concerned friend act is a little hard to swallow considering I know what I did hurt you, I acknowledged. I betrayed your trust. But I'd do it again if it meant keeping you from making a bigger mistake. Like kidnapping my own daughter? He shook his head. "You really think I would have gone through with that?" I met his gaze steadily. "In that moment? Yes. You were desperate. Desperate people do desperate things." He couldn't argue with that. We both knew how close to the edge he'd been. Well, it doesn't matter now, he said with forced casualness. It's done. I'm here, Emma's there, and in a few weeks she'll legally be someone else's daughter. Problem solved. Is that how you see it? Problem solved? How else should I see it? He challenged. I leaned forward. Maybe as the beginning, not the end. Beginning of what? Of you figuring out who you are without this hanging over your head. Of finding a way forward, he scoffed. What? Like some grand redemption arc? Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not interested in redeeming myself. I just want to be left alone. For how long? I pressed. A month? A year? The rest of your life? Shrugged. However long it takes. Takes for what? To forget, he said simply. We both knew that was impossible. Emma wasn't something he would ever forget, no matter how hard he tried, no matter how many bottles he emptied or how far from Boston he ran. I'm going back to work at the school next week, I said, changing tactics. My apartment has 2 bedrooms. You could stay with me, get back on your feet. I'm on my feet, he insisted, gesturing around the squalid room. This is me, standing. Nate. I don't need your charity, he interrupted harshly. Or your pity. I definitely don't need your guidance counselor routine. I stood, frustration rising. Fine. Stay here. Drink yourself to death. See if I care. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Nate's face closed off completely, any hint of vulnerability vanishing. Doors that way, he said coldly. Don't let it hit you on the way out. I should have left then. Should have given him space, time to process everything that had happened. But something made me stay. Maybe the memory of our 15-year friendship. Maybe the knowledge that beneath his anger was a pain so profound it threatened to swallow him whole. Remember when we were 10? I said quietly. And you broke your arm falling out of that tree in my backyard? He looked at me warily, confused by the change of subject. What about it? You were so scared your dad would be mad about the medical bills that you made me promise not to tell anyone how it happened. Said you'd make up a story about falling off your bike. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Your mom didn't buy it for a second. No, she didn't, I agreed. She drove us to the hospital anyway, and when your dad showed up, he wasn't mad, Nate finished softly. He was just worried about me. Sometimes the things we're most afraid of aren't as bad as we think they'll be, I said. And sometimes the people we push away are the ones we need most. He looked at me for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. That's a bit on the nose, don't you think? Maybe, I conceded. But it's still true. He sighed, sinking down onto his mattress. I'm tired, Jake. Really fucking tired. I know, I said, sitting beside him. Me too. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything that had happened settling around us. Not comfortable, not yet, but not actively hostile either. I don't know who I am anymore, he finally admitted, his voice barely audible above the fan's mechanical whirring. For the past 2 years, everything has been about Emma. Getting to see her, fighting for her, running from her, giving her up. Now that it's over, I don't know what's left. You're still you, I told him. The parts that existed before, all this, they're still there. Are they? He wondered. Because I don't feel like the same person at all. You're not, I acknowledged. None of us are. But that doesn't mean you're lost completely. He rubbed his face with both hands, suddenly looking exhausted beyond his years. I don't know if I can do this, Jake. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You don't have to be, I said simply. Not all at once, and not alone. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since I'd arrived. Why are you still here? After everything I said, everything I nearly did? Because that's what friends do, I answered. They show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Something inside him seemed to crumble then, not dramatically, not with tears or sobs, but a quiet collapse, like a building whose foundation has been slowly eroded, finally giving way. I shouldn't have signed those papers, he whispered, the confession torn from somewhere deep inside him. I keep telling myself it was the right thing, the noble thing, but the truth is I was just scared. Scared of jail, scared of fighting a battle I couldn't win, scared of seeing her grow up calling another man daddy. It's not too late, I said. The papers might not have been processed yet. You could call your lawyer. And what? He interrupted, bitterly. Go back? Face charges? Watch as they parade my failures in front of a judge? No thanks. Then what do you want to do? I asked simply. He was quiet for a long time, considering. I don't know, he finally admitted. But I can't stay here. My offer still stands. The apartment, as long as you need it. He nodded slowly. Maybe just for a few days, until I figure things out. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next morning, I helped Nate pack his meager belongings into the same duffel bag he'd arrived with. He settled his bill with the landlord and bid a quiet goodbye to the noodle shop owner downstairs, who pressed extra dumplings into his hands with grandmotherly concern. As we walked toward the